accurate body measurement is a big deal when it comes to good fitting, especially in freehand cutting. For that seamstress designer, correct measurements taken and applying them correctly is literally your battle axe on the fabric. Remember how freehand cutting works. It's your style in mind, your measurements broken down correctly for all the various parts to be cut, your fabric on your cutting table, your marking tools, cutting tools standby, plus your confidence. You can double check, triple check all other details, but you only get to cut just once, and that's it. Also, remember that the data pertaining to the measurement is what literally translates into the style. It's going to determine a lot of things. In fact, everything connected to the style is going to determine the length of the outfit, the shallowness or deepness of the neckline, the outline of the dress, the flow of the dress, the volume of fullness to use, your dart location, everything that is necessary for correct fitting. And so with all this explanation, you can understand that correct measurements taken cannot be compromised. Now, this updated tutorial will teach you two things. Number one, it's going to teach you how to read the tape and understand the fractions involved so you can break down your measurements correctly. And then number two, it's going to walk you through a simple process of taking a set of body measurements. It's great for beginners. And even for you who is already on the sewing journey, come along. I can assure you, you'll still learn a thing or two. Welcome to the tape reading segment. A quick one though before we delve in. What's the fuss about fractions when it comes to body measurements and breaking it down? Now here is the thing. Some of the measurements are broken down into halves and quarters before we use them for cutting out. And so it is important that you're able to locate your halves and quarters on the tape. No measurement is useless when it comes to cutting out. Every half is important, every quarter is important, every 1/8 is important. No measurement is too insignificant to be thrown away. Now, when you're working with odd numbers, especially, a lot of 3/4, quarters, 1/8 are going to come up. And so it is important that once you get your whole number plus a quarter plus 3/4 plus 1/8, you are able to locate these quarters, halves, and 1/8 on the tape. That is what this whole thing is about. So this is the tape as we know it, a tape measure for sewing. And for this part, we have it in inches from 1 inch up to 60 inches. And then for the back, you have it in centimeters from 1 centimeter up to 150 centimeters. Now for our sewing projects and tutorials, we're going to be using inches throughout. Now, what you have here is a representation of what is on the tape. It's just an expanded form of what is on the tape. If you can see the tape, it's in 1, 2, 3, it's been demarcated. And so the lines you see on the visual aid is just a representation of the fractions on the tape. So here is how it works. First, let's identify the lines. We have 4 different lengths. We have the very long line, and then we have one that is slightly shorter than the initial one, and then we have a third one that is also shorter than this, and then we have a last one that is shorter than this. So we have 4 different lengths. From one long line to the next long line is 1 whole inch. So the movement is from this point to this point is 1 whole inch. And then from this point to this point is also 1 whole inch. So what you have here is just a repetition of what you have here. I just wanted to expand it. So let's focus on the space here. Now, after we've noted our boundary, where our 1 inch starts and where our 1 inch ends, we are going to divide the 1 inch into two. So then this is the line dividing the 1 inch into two. This is the representation of half an inch. So it means from this point to this point represents half an inch. From this point to this point represents half an inch. So our half an inch will be from this long line to this semi long line. That's a half an inch. So you have half an inch here plus half, another half here will give you 1 whole inch. So this is ½ inch plus ½ inch, giving you 1 whole inch. Now a ½ inch has again been divided, and this is the line dividing a ½ inch. If you look at the space, you can clearly see that this is the line that divides a ½ inch. So now we have another fraction. From this point to this point now becomes a quarter of an inch. This point to this point becomes a quarter of an inch. So this is a representation of quarter. This is a representation of another quarter. So a quarter plus a quarter will give you half. This is also another quarter, all in the 1 inch. So a quarter plus a quarter will give you half an inch. Now if you add another quarter to the half an inch, what you get is 3/4. So it's a quarter, quarter, quarter. So you get 3/4. So we are now learning that it is 4/4 that will give you 1 whole inch. So this is a quarter, this is a quarter, this is a quarter, and this is another quarter. That is 4/4. Two of the quarters will give you half an inch. The other 2/4 will give you half an inch. Now the 4/4 combined, 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, and the last quarter will give you 4/4, representing 1 whole inch. So this is how it works. Now the last fraction to take note of is a quarter that has been divided, and that is the sign. This is the line dividing our quarter, and this is our 1/8 line, 1/8. So from this point to this point is 1/8, and 1/8 is half of a quarter. You understand? 1/8 is half of the quarter. So 1/8, this is 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8, 5/8, 6/8, 7/8, 8/8 will give you 1 whole inch. Okay, so now that we've understood what the fraction means or what the lines represents, let's do a quick test to see how the lines work. First, let's take a random number like 39, which has an odd number. Now, if we are asked to divide 39 into 2, what will be the answer? The answer for 39 into 2 should be 19 and a half. So this will be your 19 and a half. So you can clearly determine where the half should be. Now the same 39, let's say we want a quarter of 39. What would that be? A quarter of 39 will be 9/3/4. 9/3/4. So the first thing is to locate your 0.9, which is this. And then let's see how we locate our 3/4. This is our first quarter. This is our second quarter. This is our third quarter. So this will be our 9 3/4. Every fraction is important. You can't say a quarter is too small, so it's negligent. Hi, welcome to the measurement taking segment. Now, before we dig into it, here are a few quick tips. Number one, your clients must have the correct foundation garments. You know, we are in an era where we are prepping the body a lot before we wear our outfits, our outer garments. We are in an era where we are using padded bras, we are using girdles and waist trainers to trim in the waist. We're using padded hip to add extra inches to our hip. So if you're a client and you're going to take your measurements and you know these are the basic things you use, make sure you're using the same foundation garments before the measurements are taken, because if you go with your normal bust line and the data is taken, that is what is going to be used for the outfit. Now if you're using your normal bust line, that's, let's say, 40 inches, and when the outfit is sewn, that is when you decide you're going to use your padded bra, which is going to add a few inches to the hip line. We're going to have fitting problems. So please ensure that whatever foundation garment you use before you use your outer garments, as a client, you're wearing those foundation garments. And you who is going to take the measurement, consult with your client and ask, clarify these details. Number two, please make sure the client is wearing something fitted, not baggy clothes or loose clothes. The body must be outlined, so it will make the measurement taking easy. Number three, clearly define the waistline before you start taking the measurement, especially if the figure is a plus size figure. This is not to body shame anyone, but usually, sometimes with plus size figures, it's very difficult to determine where the actual waistline is. That should be sorted out before the measurement is taken. A quick and common tip is to let the client take a dip either towards the left hand side or towards the right hand side, whichever way is convenient. As the person bends over, there'll be a little dent at the side. That is most probably where the person's waistline would be. As soon as you get that location, please tie a string around that area to locate the waistline. So once you start taking the measurement and you get to the waistline, there's no doubt as to where the exact location is. It makes the measurement taking easy. The next thing is that do not hurry through the process. Take your time. Take your time to go through the measurements, and then if possible, the key points that are the base, the bust, waist, hip, double check the very important position, like the dart position, the dart interval, the shoulder to your true bust point. That should be checked and cross-checked. Your under bust location, those things are very key, so you make sure you double check. And last but not the least, please make sure your figure is standing upright throughout the measurements. This is my very tall dummy. Not the best of figures for measurement taking, because ideally the figure must be standing upright, but she's more one-sided. Please bear with me. It's just a visual aid to help us go through the process. We're just making do with what we have. But the lesson behind the whole thing should not be lost. The principles and the points behind measurement taking would not be lost. That's the most important thing. I am going to use myself as a dummy too for a couple of the measurements. So we are going to be taking 2 sets of measurements. We're going to be taking measurements that go across the body, and then we're going to take measurements that go lengthwise. There's no hard and fast rule as to which one to start with, but usually you take, if you're taking the crosswise measurements, you take all the crosswise measurements as a set. And then if you're taking the lengthwise measurements, you take all the lengthwise measurements as a set. Like I said, there's no hard and fast rule. I'm going to start with the crosswise measurements. And so we're going to start from the shoulder. So the highest point of the neck here to the bone, outer bone at the shoulder. And so you're going to place the tape at the point A and then measure across to the bone of the arm. For this, I have 5.5. So that would be my shoulder measurement. Now, from the shoulder measurement, we're going to be moving to the across chest measurement. The across chest measurement is the location from one armhole across the chest to the other armhole. And so you're going to place the tip just at the tip of the armhole and then measure across to the other armhole. Always make sure the tape is straight. It shouldn't be slanted upwards or downwards. You should have a straight line across the chest. So from one armhole to the other, you're going to get your across chest measurement. So just as we took the across chest measurement, we're going to be taking the across back measurement. So you follow the same process from the tip of one armhole to the other tip. And so we are going to go across the back. Make sure the tip is parallel to the ground. So you go across from one armhole to the other would be your across back measurement. So from the across chest and then across back measurement, we are moving to the bust measurement. We are going to take the bust measurement. Now the bust measurement should be taken on the highest point of the bust. Make sure the tape lies across the bust, the highest point of the bust, and then you end up with your bust measurement. Please make sure the tape is firm. It shouldn't be too loose and it shouldn't be too tight. There should be a little ease in the measurement. So at least you should be able to pass a finger through the tape. The most important thing is that the tape must lie straight both in front and at the back of the body. So I have 36 as the bust measurement for this figure. Now, having taken the bust measurement, we're going to move to the true bust point, getting the measurement in between the two bust points. That's your nipple to nipple measurement. So you place the tape at the tip of the left nipple and then move it in a straight line across to the other nipple. This is your nipple to nipple measurement, and this measurement determines the placement of darts. When you start working with darts, it will determine where your darts should be, where your princess lines should run through, and all that. So we are moving to the waist now. I have this string tied around the waist so we can clearly define where the waistline is. So like we did with the bust measurements, you're going to go across the waist. You're going to go round the body through the back and then through the waist. So this will be your waist measurements. I have 27 as the waist measurement. Again, ensure the tape is not too tight. It should just be snug. It shouldn't be too tight and it shouldn't be too loose. The rule is that at least you should be able to have a finger within the tape for ease allowance. Now moving from the waistline, we are going to be taking a hip measurement. Now the hip measurement should be taken at the widest part of the hip. Usually the span from the waistline downwards, all this area can be called your hip area. But the correct position to take the hip measurement should be at the widest part of the hip, where the hip just juts out of the body. I mean, usually it's very, very prominent. It's very easy to tell where the widest part of the hip is. So again, just as we did with the waist, you're going to go around the body and then take the full measurement of the hip at the widest part of it. We have 38 for the hip. Now, viewing the process, the tip across the figure may look a bit slanted. It is because of the posture of the dummy. You know, this is not a real figure. It is not standing upright as it's supposed to be. So viewing it, it may look as if the tip is crooked, but it's actually straight. It is because of the slanting of the dummy. So we are going to continue with the second set of measurements, which will be the lengthwise measurements running from the top of the body downwards. And so the first set of measurements we are going to take will be our shoulder to our true bust point. The true bust point is the tip of your nipple. Remember, we took the nipple to nipple measurement. So where the nipple stands out will be your true bust point. Now, after we've taken the shoulder to the true bust point, we also take the shoulder to the under bust. So we have the true bust point, and then we'll take the shoulder to the under bust, and then we'll take the shoulder to the waist. That will be for the front set. Then we can move to the back. So again, we are starting at the highest point of the shoulder, straight down to the nipple point. Please make sure the tip is straight. So this is my true bust point, and I have 10.5 inches, 10.5 inches. So with that, I'm going to continue to the under bust point. So the true bust point, and then from the true bust point, you move to the under bust. I have 13.5 for the under bust. And then from the under bust, I'm moving to the front shoulder to waist measurement. So you see, I have ensure that the tape is safely under the under bust point, and then I bring the tape down to the waist point. What you should not be doing is to measure just over the bust point straight to the waist. You should always make sure that the tape goes underneath the bust before it lands at the waist. As we did with the front, taking the shoulder to waist measurement, we also need to take the shoulder to waist back measurements, because most times the two measurements are not the same. The shoulder point downwards to the waist measurement, for this I have 15.5. So you can clearly see that the back shoulder to waist measurement for this figure is different from the front shoulder to waist measurement. This is so because usually with the front shoulder to waist measurement, you are going over the bust, you are going underneath the bust before you get to the waist point. So usually you'd have a higher figure than the back. The back is a straight route. You're not going over anything. It's a straight route from the shoulder point to the waist point. So always ensure you have cross check. You have a separate measurement for the front shoulder to waist, and then shoulder to waist for the back to ensure good fitting. Having taken the back shoulder to waist measurement, we are now going to take the top length or the blouse length, and then we'll take our dress length. So we're going to go to the highest point again, and then go over to the waist, and then down to wherever you want the um, blouse or the top to end. Usually it's supposed to end where we took the hip measurement at the widest part of the hip. That's the standard top length measurement. But as you work or as you do your project, it will vary depending on the demands of the style. So a top length can be just beyond the waist depending on the style, but for the purposes of records, you take the top length from the shoulder point down to the hip point where we took our hip measurements. Taking the dress length now, so to the waist, from the shoulder to the waist point, and then downwards to wherever the client wants the dress to end, at the knee level, beyond the knee level, down to the ankle. You take the full length measurement. Now I'm going to be the model for taking the hip depth measurement. That's why I have at my waist clearly defined. The hip depth is the span between the smallest part of the waist to the widest part of the hip. So this whole area from my waistline, the demarcated waistline, to the widest part of my hip is my hip depth. And so we're going to place the tape on the cord and then measure down. I got 9. So for the various skirt lengths, we are going to be taking it from the waist down to just after your hip point will be your micro skirt length, and then down onto just where your knee starts will be your mini skirt length. We've done the micro, we've done the mini, now we'll do the midi. Midi is anywhere from your knee downwards to halfway of your leg. So anywhere, somewhere here will be your midi length, and then your maxi length will be your full length to the heel or down to the sole of your feet. So we're taking the 3 lengths of our skirt: our micro length, our mini length, our midi length, or what we call 3/4, and then our maxi length. Now you're going to use the same positions to measure your full length measurements from the shoulder point downwards. So taking the thigh measurement now, the thigh measurement is taken at the biggest part of the leg towards the hip, next to the hip, the widest part of the leg or the thickest part of the leg. That's where you take the thigh measurement. The tape goes in and around the thigh, and make sure there's a lot of ease. And so you make sure there's ease. You move it around to see that there's ease. 28. Now I'm going to take the bar measurement for the trousers, and so put the tape around. Be loose enough for you to be able to pass the heel in and out, free enough. So I got 13 for this. And last but not the least set of measurements will be the sleeve measurements. So we are going to go with, again, for the length of the sleeve, we are going to start from the base point of the bone on the arm. So you take your various lengths. If it's a short sleeve, it should be halfway through the upper arm, then down to the elbow, and then If you're taking the full length, it should end on the wrist bone. And you're going to go and measure the upper arm, which is the around arm measurements, around the thickest part of the arm or the biceps of the client. And then you should also have the elbow measurement here, where the person will be able to move the elbow freely without the tape restricting it. And then the last thing will be to take the wrist measurements. Now the wrist measurements for fitted garments should, unless it's a shirt that's going to have an opening, the wrist measurement should be taken with a little ease so it can slide over the fingers freely. If you take a very fitted wrist measurement and you don't leave an opening, then there will be difficulty with wearing it or taking it off. So thanks for sticking with me to the end. It's a wrap. See you in the next tutorial. Bye.